Hello and welcome to the Holographic Podcast. I'm your host, Tony, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kyle, the salty dog. Kyle, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I am well, Tony. I am warm and dry and safe, and that's good enough for me right now.
Excellent. I am also warm and dry and safe. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today. It's been a tumultuous past month with politics and pandemics and whatnot. So we've been talking a little bit about that sort of thing, but today I want to switch gears and talk about something a little bit more esoteric, a little bit more fun, a little bit more culturally positive, which is art. Art and the nature of art. What is it? Why is it important? And that sort of thing. Obviously, I think art is very important. Kyle, would you agree?
Very, very, very important.
Very, very, very important, especially in these times, tumultuous times. So let's jump right into it. So art, the definition of art, it varies, but I found the Oxford definition of art. So let me read the Oxford definition of art. English Oxford Dictionary. It says the definition of art is the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Now, there's a lot there. That's number one. The number two, let me read the number two. The number
I like
two,
that.
it's a pretty good definition. The number
It's a really good definition.
The number two is various branches of creative activity, such as painting, music, literature, and dance. So that number two definition kind of narrows it down. But the first definition really talks about an expression or application of skill and imagination, and it says typically, which could be anything. So I do appreciate that definition, but I also challenge that definition a little bit. I think it's a little too narrow. I think art is broader than that because not everyone is as creative or imaginative, but you can still do things. You can still do artistic things. Now, one thing that I did find on the interweb, in this particular case, I went on the interweb a little bit. You know, I'm not a huge fan of searching for things on the internet, but in this case, I did go on there, and there was a discussion about how there's a difference between art and being artistic. So some people, critics, this was a critical thing. Critics say there's art to be appreciated and judged, and there's people that are artistic and may not produce worthwhile art. That was a major thing with critics, and I reject this notion. Kyle, would you agree that, or what do you think about the difference between art, producing art, and being artistic? Do you think that that's a thing? Do you think there's a separation there?
Oh, 100%. And actually, I'm a perfect example. I am artistic. I have the ability to render and, make things typically in a visual thing. I can draw, I can paint, sculpt, blah, blah, blah. But I have always lacked the creative impetus to do it on my own. So if I have, and writing is another example. I have difficulty conjuring up stories. But if I have a writing prompt, or if somebody asks me for a design, like a visual component to sort of transfer an image or something, then I can take that and I can run with it, and then I can create. But I can't remember the last time I actually sat down at a blank canvas or with a blank piece of paper and said, I'm going to write a story. I am going to conjure an image just for the sake of doing it. And so my talents, I feel like, nominal as they are, they lie more in the execution part than the creative impulses.
So
I don't have, and I don't have both. Maybe a little bit, but I'm missing the first part, and my strength more lies in the latter part. So yeah, I think it makes a fair amount of sense to me.
So let's back up a little bit, because I want to talk about that, but let's back up a touch. So I laid out kind of a definition of art from the Oxford English Dictionary. Now, in my personal opinion, I think it's broader than that. I think art can be any expression of human imagination. And so human imagination is very broad. And so I think that expression of human imagination is also very broad. So my definition of art is giant. And I'll actually get to that later. I'm going to relate it to the holographic universe, how big my definition of art is. So what is your personal definition of art? Would you agree with the Oxford Dictionary definition? Or do you think it's closer to my broad definition?
I mean, I think it's kind of funny that you're taking umbrage and calling the Oxford English Dictionary's definition somehow narrow. I thought it was quite broad. I think it basically included everything. I mean, that was me. Maybe I have to hear it again, because I sort of feel like it gave room for whatever what you're talking about as well. Can you read it again?
Sure. And that certainly is a good take on it. It says the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. So it's the second part. It's the second part that kind of narrows it down a little bit. The first part is the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination. Now that's
I don't know what more you're looking for.
That it's the second part that narrows it down. It says producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Now the problem that I see is that beauty and emotional power is subjective. So beauty is obviously a very subjective thing. Emotional power is a very subjective thing. So appreciation is the problem that I have, and that's the problem in this culture. That I think the issue with art is that art has got to the point where it has to be appreciated for it to have value, or critics or individuals who criticize or decide what art is, or decide if they like something, is based on their own appreciation. And I think that's okay for the individual. I just don't think that it should narrow down in what art can be or should be.
I see what you're saying, but I would just sort of say that the OED gives itself an out by using that one word primarily.
Primarily, right.
Typically,
or
whatever it was. So they leave room even though they don't explain it. But then the other part is, I mean, I think you make a valid point. At the same time, there are literally millions of, or I don't know, lots, thousands, no, I'd say millions of people out there that make art, create art, do art in various forms, visually, musically, whatever, tactile stuff, with zero cares or zero desires really to have it be the subject of other people's scrutiny or critique. And so, I think that even though the definition doesn't really hone in on that throughout history, and obviously now that there's 6 or 7 billion souls on the planet, more and more, there are millions of people out there that do the type of art that you're basically talking about. They do it because it somehow soothes the soul, or it creates an outlet for whatever kinds of creative impulses or energies they have. And they don't look at any kind of end game being, well, I need this to be an A grade, or I have to have an approval here. So, I think that it exists, and I think that you're, asking for it is good, or having it be part of the definition, I think is valuable. But just because it's not part of the definition, the one thing I would say is that that doesn't mean that it's not absolutely a reality, because it is. Oftentimes I'm not rambling, but I'm going on because it's deep. I wish that's what I'm missing. You know what I mean? I'm missing that drive to make stuff for the sake of making stuff.
So, well, that's a good point. So what drives people? It's interesting because in the past, when you study history, a lot of the great art was driven by frankly a dictatorship. Whatever you want to call a monarchy, or whatever you want to call a religious monotheistic control, that's what drove great art. These guys, these high church guys, said, you need to make this. And they went, oh, I'm a fanatic believer, I'm going to make it. Or the king said, you need to make this. And they said, all right, well, give me a bunch of gold and I'm going to make it. It's interesting that throughout history, this dictatorship driven art is one of the greatest arts that we have. So do humans need, if we're all artistic, do humans need this like crazy push to make great art? Is it possible to just make great art without some sort of push or some sort of monetary reward? Is that even possible?
I think it definitely is, and I think that even though I can't,
what, like what? Name me one.
What? Well, I name you one amazing piece of art that wasn't like created because of a big money or influence.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that
I put you on the spot there. That wasn't.
Well, no. Hold on. No.
Okay.
I'm thinking. So, what about famous artists? Like, what about Pablo Picasso's Guernica? That wasn't money or art that drove it. That was horrendous and tragic act of war. You know what I mean? So I guess in a way that's a primary mover, but that's not a king saying something like make this. That was a direct result of this man's desire to put some of the horrors of the Spanish Civil War on canvas.
Right.
I think that you can definitely find art that was not motivated or pushed by money or influence or power. I mean, if I had more of an encyclopedic brain, I don't think this would be a hard thing to come up with at all. And my first impulse was actually to go back. Would we consider it great art? I don't really know, but let's just take a look at like the Lascaux cave paintings of like Neolithic like cavemen. You know what I mean? Is that great art? From a critic's perspective, well, maybe not compared to like a Paul Rubens. I think he was a famous, or Jan Vermeer. You know what I mean?
You mean Pee Wee Herman? Paul Rubens?
No.
I'm just teasing. I know what you mean. And yes, okay. So to put this together, yeah, you're absolutely right. There is. I asked the question, but I'm just kind of being the devil's advocate. I think art can be created without those catalysts, but
I think it is all the time.
It is all the time, but those catalysts can push it into a different direction, or can, you just said that sometimes you have a hard time being motivated to create it. And so what I'm trying to get at is I think that most humans have the capacity. In fact, let me rephrase that. All humans, every single human on this planet, 7 billion of us, 7.5 billion of us, have the capacity to create art, have the capacity to create something worthwhile. Now, the question is with critics, like you just said, is this cave painting critically better or worse than something created by a critically acclaimed artist? And so my argument, the reason that I'm not a fan of the definition of art is because I don't think that a criticism has much of a place in art in the grand scheme of things. Does it have a place for monetary art? Yeah, I mean, if you want to go buy and purchase something, and you put value on things that have value like that, you put value on value, then yes, there is a place for monetized art. But in my opinion, real art, what I'm getting at is the definition of real art shouldn't have a critical aspect to it. It shouldn't be good or bad. It shouldn't be better or worse than another one, because art isn't about that criticism. Art is about the expression. How are you supposed to criticize someone's expression? It just kind of, it seems strange to me how you can criticize someone's expression. So
Well, I see the point you're making. My only warning would be I don't think that you need to attach labels or words like should or is or are, or must be, because the thing is that we're talking about something that comes in so many forms that there's room for all of it. So, I think that I would agree to a certain level that a critical eye should not be the be all end all of the value of a piece of art. It could be, in some perspectives, an important part of the provenance of that artwork, but it doesn't have to be the one factor that makes it good or not so good. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody values a piece intrinsically and they're just happy with it, it needs go no further. If they feel like they would be happier if it had some sort of critical eye put upon it and had some sort of value assessed or grade assessed based on some sort of criteria, and that makes them feel better, or that gives it a monetary value, then there's room for that too. We can even talk about it as both of those scenarios on one piece of art. It's still, I believe it has value in both scenarios. You know what I mean? The only other thing also I was going to say is I just was thinking, going back, I would to one of the things we were talking about before, I would actually say that there's just as much art that was created without money and influence that turned out to be quite valuable in the human story as was made with the money and influence. So yes, you're right. The religious people in the church, they commissioned all this other stuff. But I mean, my mind went to Jackson Pollock, the splatter paint guy. He wasn't doing it for, any reason other than that's what he did. And he became famous in doing it. I don't know much about Georgia O'Keeffe, but she made those flowers. I don't know that she was, like influenced by anybody to do it, aside from she just wanted to make flowers,
Well, in their minds, were they looking for a monetary reward? Were they artists?
I don't know.
Who were, was that their living? Was they like, I need to make some money, so I'm going to do this to make a living?
Possibly.
Now, if that's the case, we've talked in the past about universal basic income. If we had universal basic income and artists were taken care of regardless of whether they produced good art or not, here's the question, could you get better art because they didn't have to worry about money, or would you get worse art because they weren't motivated by a higher monetary reward?
I don't think that there's a concrete answer for that. I think that it's such a big, the human mind is driven to create for various for different motivational reasons. Money, just the desire to create for no reason, other than a need for it, an intrinsic need. And I think that you're going to, with or without UBI, by the way, I'm pro UBI. I could use
Me too.
UBI.
Pro UBI.
I want UBI.
Me too.
Right now. But, I don't think that would actually I don't think that would change everything.
So
actually, I think it would actually be, it might be good. I think we'd actually see more art.
I think it would be good. So some people argue that UBI would create laziness, and then people would not be motivated to do much. I disagree.
Those people are idiots.
Yeah, no, I disagree with that. I think it's the opposite. With UBI, people would actually be motivated to do a lot more because they're not focused on going to a 9-to-5 dead-end job that they're forced to do and they have no choice they have, you know, very little choices, I think creativity would actually explode. I think there would be a lot of creativity, a lot of energy put in different things.
I think you may in fact be correct, and I also think that general like happiness would be increased as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So being creative and you know, making art seems to have a direct correlation on our happiness, right? I mean, so that's just like base number one why it's so important is when you're creative and you're able to express yourself, you just end up being more happy. I mean, it's just a fact. But let's get into why it's so important in just a second. Before we do, let's talk about our own experiences with art and kind of how we express ourselves. Because again, these definitions, you know, in number 2 definitions, it says the branches of activity include painting, music, literature, and dance. So it kind of narrows it down a little bit. And I think that those are important. And I'm not taking anything away from those. They're extremely important, and they're extremely cool. You know, whatever the word you want to use to judge it, I just don't want to be so judgy about those certain things. Now, my experience with art is very different. I'm not very creative with drawing, and I have a hard time making a tune, so I don't have a whole lot of music. You know, I've done some writing, but I'm certainly not a great creator of literature, and I can dance worth a shit. So I don't fit into any of those things.
You're a dud. You're an artistic dud.
I'm an artistic dud. But in my opinion, I'm actually a very good artist, but my art has nothing to do with those. My art is through my body. So I've mentioned before on the show, I'm a martial artist. So what I've been doing lately, I've been teaching Tai Chi Chuan, and I practice Tai Chi and different martial arts and things like that. And so when you teach people these things using energy in their body, you move in a way that is creative. You move in a way that is unique. So martial arts and Tai Chi, it's not rigid. You see martial arts and you think, oh, you have to do a punch or a block, but that's not the reality. The reality is that it's all internal. You use your internal energy to create an external expression of movement. So this external expression of movement is very creative, and it can help a lot of people with movement through the body for a variety of things, for health reasons, for mental reasons, all that kind of stuff. So as I teach, and the success that I've had with students and the success that I've had in my own body, healing myself and feeling good, to me is that expression of art. And it's been so worthwhile to me. It's been so important in my life. And so that artistic expression for me is very valid. And sometimes I feel like society doesn't make it as valid as it should. Sometimes, you know, and it's hard for me to get any sort of monetary reward. And so I'm not looking for a monetary reward because I'm not getting any, but there's obviously, it's very hard to take that avenue. So if there was UBI, I feel like that expression could be much greater, that I could help a lot more people if there was UBI. So that certainly is a big thing in my life. I think I could be much more creative with that and help a lot more people if there was some sort of UBI. So that's the art for me. And also this sort of thing, talking and doing shows like this, you know, this is my creative expression. So it's been very worthwhile. I think it's very important, and it makes me happy. It makes me think about things. So that's kind of my art path. Kyle, what's your art path?
Well, I just want to say I value what you just said. And I think that it is definitely a totally valid and important expression. You know, your Tai Chi Chuan stuff, I've seen you do it. It's really lovely to behold and observe. And even on top of that, you know, our little podcast project here may not fit the definition of art, but it is a creative output. And you actually prefaced the whole project to me that way. You said, you know, I've been lacking an outlet for my creativity. and this is going to be it. And so I think that both of those are valuable examples. I just wanted to throw that in there. So thank you for your art.
My pleasure.
My art history and sort of connection with it is sort of more standard. My father was an art teacher for his career, and prior to that, he is an artist, an amazing painter, woodworker, sculptor. I mean, really, whatever he put his mind to, but mostly visual. Pen and ink and paint was his best or most utilized means of expression. My mother was the same, excellent painter. So I have that sort of in the family. And even as a child, art was one of the few places, art class was one of the few places where I really kind of excelled and enjoyed myself. In my adult life, I would say I'm more of just like a dabbler. You know what I mean? I never really went deep into it. Again, mostly because I felt like I was missing that sort of creative drive to do it. That left. I don't know. I had it when I was a kid. I used to draw a lot of comic book characters, stuff like that. And I used to doodle and draw and make some pretty good work. But as I became an adult, that kind of went away, and I became more focused on activities and tactile ways to spend my time. But I still dabble from time to time, and I also do some creative writing. I do most of the time need a prompt. I prefer a project as opposed to just sitting down and conjuring up an imaginative story. I usually need an emotional prompt. I wrote years ago a short eulogy for a sports star, a motorcycle racer that died tragically, and it just sort of bubbled up out of me. But it was a direct result of in this case a tragedy. And I just felt the need to do it, and it never got anywhere. I wasn't seeking publication for it. I did submit it because I thought that it was worth sharing, not for monetary purposes, but because I wanted other people to have the experience of reading it and maybe, maybe finding out that they share the same feelings about this person. So, most of the time, I really just, like I said, I don't go too deep. I dabble. Should I show you my current project? Is this a good time?
Yeah, Kyle has a current project. I'd like to see it.
So, yeah, I've been making bullets into Buddhas, and it's actually bulletstobuddhas.com. We're working on the website right now.
Bulletstobuddhas.com, ladies and gentlemen.
This is most definitely financially motivated. Okay, so I'm doing this for money, baby, money. And so, buy yours now. It's sort of like it's you actually can't buy them now. I haven't stockpiled enough yet, but it's something that my dad and his buddy got going, and the idea sort of like has a lot of merit, not only just because the process is fun, but also it's sort of like a swords into plowshares sort of idea, turning the weapons of war or destruction or death into symbols of peace and goodwill. And so basically what we do is I have a very crude forge, which I'm working on getting better, and I might in fact improve it. But I've been taking old brass bullet casings and I melt them down into molten, and I pour them into a mold, and I create these little brass Buddhas, which you can see.
Oh, look at that. They're little molds, little brass Buddhas. They're very cool. They're different shades and different, the metals looks like it's come out a little different for each one. So each one is unique.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be experimenting with, I'll hold up a couple just for a detail. And, I know for those of us, those of our large swath of followers, that may in fact not be looking and reading, listening, I'm experimenting with a couple of different types. So basically, I like the idea of the brass because, again, it is
There it
It's
is.
it's
Little
the
brass
gold.
Buddha.
I've also cast in copper recently. That one's copper, and you can see, like Tony says, they're all different. They're all mostly imperfect. Every once in a while, I really do. I left the overflow on this one, as you can see.
Oh, that's really cool. I like I like the overflow on that one. Yeah.
Yep. And some of them, the face comes out really good, and other ones have no face at all. You know, it's
Yeah.
just a form of Buddha. So yeah, I mean, for me, you know, again, going back to your question, you know, I get inspired for a little while or for a moment. Sometimes it's fleeting. Most of the time it's fleeting, and I do something, and then I'm usually done with it. I expect that I will be doing this a little bit, a bunch over the next few years, and because I've been enjoying the process. And I tell you, molten metal is freaking cool, man. I mean, it's actually extremely hot, but it's cool. It's like, it's really neat, and
Yeah.
I like the
Do you have
process.
like the giant silver gloves? You got like the big gloves and everything?
I have the welder's gloves, but
Gloves,
you know,
okay.
what you really need are the big metal calipers and holders and stuff. And it's all, like I said, I am just barely getting going in this.
Yeah.
I haven't even figured out what my best fuel source is. My blower yesterday started to not work so well. And I broke the cap of the forge. So the cap to the crucible broke yesterday. So, you know, it's a process. Luckily, I'm about to go into full winter. So I'm going to put all of it away for a little while. But I also I like how the process is not, there's so much to it, because what I really need is I need a maker space. You know what I mean? And this forging thing.
Yeah, so absolutely. So it sounds like, you know, it's some art that you do that it's almost like it's a meditative, it's a form of meditation, because
There's a lot of process.
But it empties your mind when you're doing this forging, when you're creating this, and when you're dealing with those issues. You're not thinking about politics. You're not dealing with anything else. You're not thinking about the bullshit. You're just focusing on this creative process.
It's kind of like your Tai Chi forms. I'm going
Oh, absolutely.
through motions. I make
Yeah.
the fire. I turn on the blower. The fire gets hot. I wait. I move. The cap comes off. I check things. Notice my Tai Chi movements right now. I take it. I look. I visually inspect. I put the crucible on top. We turn it. We move it. And then I'm just like, fuck, bad pour.
And that's interesting, because, you know, it's a learning process, and that's with any sort of art. I mean, I've been training in martial arts for, wow, it's almost over 25 years, you know, almost 30 years. And I'm constantly learning, and I'm constantly discovering new things, and it takes a long time. And so I think that all art is somewhat of an acquired skill. Your own personal art is an acquired skill to make it an expression of how you want. I don't think that you can just, while everyone has, in my opinion, everyone has art and everyone can express art. I don't think it's something that you can just do like, oh, there it is, no problem, I'm done. You have to work on it. You have to change it and adjust it and do different things. And that process is the artistic process. I think that's part of the meditative process. That's what clears our mind and helps us, is that training in any art.
It really is good for the soul, good for the psyche. And however you do it, that would be the other thing is, and we don't have to go into a long discussion about this, but a lot of times people would say, well, I don't really have the creative drive to do this. But you know, you don't need to go deep and really tap into some like deep well of creativity to make art or be involved in small processes of art that will in fact help your psyche. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
Our friend JG, okay, for example, he loves photography. Okay. And I'm always chastising because we take a walk in the woods or something, and he's always like 30 feet behind me or 100 feet behind me. I'm like, come on, Jay, let's go. He is in his place. He is in his process. He's snapping pictures, and that's what he likes to do. And even though sometimes I get cross because I'm like, let's get there, Jay, but it's not really fair for me to do it, and I'm only being partially serious about it because that's where his creativity or his soul psyche succour comes from. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
absolutely. And I would argue too that when he, back when I hung out with the crowd many, many years ago, and he was starting to snap pictures, and he would do it casually and snap pictures, and then he was getting more into it. And it took him many years to find an eye for certain things, and so it was building. His creativity and his talent was building up, but at the beginning, it wasn't like he was like, oh, like I'm gonna do this exactly like this. He was just trying something, and so I think that's very important in art. Like you said, like you're just trying a little bit at first, and it builds up. And so, like in martial arts, we actually talk about your basics, and it's kind of like a pyramid. To get to this high capstone on the top of the pyramid, which is being perfect, which none of us are ever going to get to, but that's the goal, is to be as perfect as we can in certain techniques. You have to have all these little stones at the bottom of a pyramid, and then another layer of stones and another layer of stones. And so you have to build up all these skills to get higher in this level of skill. But all those little stones don't come easy, and they're not perfect, and they don't come from a place that is out of knowing exactly what to do. So you just have to try and place each stone, and over many, many years, you finally end up getting closer to the top of this pyramid of your own artistic expression.
Brick by brick, stick by stick, eventually you'll have a house.
That's exactly right. So this kind of brings us into the value of art. We talked about before how the value of art makes us happy. I mentioned how it has a meditative effect, and I'm someone who works with energy and helping people with their own energy. And so meditation is very important to relax us. And I do absolutely think that art has a meditative value. And I think it's actually very close to what other people would just consider meditation. Like when certain high masters say, oh, you have to do this for meditation and you have to do that for meditation. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think meditation can come in many, many forms, and doing art, I think, is one of those forms that can put your mind in a meditative state. So I think those are some of the values to me. Kyle, what were the values you had mentioned? The artistic value, or it's the value, just the I'm not going to put a definition on it. The value. What's the value of art to you?
Well, I mean, it comes in many forms. Certainly, the one that you just were referencing, is probably on like a certain level the most important. I would put it more important than doing things for money, is sort of like the satisfaction that somebody can get out of the creative process. And, that taps into like a scientific chemical thing in our brains. You know what I mean? You are better off for it a lot of times by allowing these processes to unfold. And I don't want to go too far ahead and say, because I don't want to limit this to only people who have some sort of mastery of the creative process. You can't button it up into too tight of a hole because you want it to be accessible to everybody. But certainly what you were talking about with the meditative process, I would say that is really one of the best values of the creative process, of the artistic process, in whatever form it takes, is it allows your brain and your mind and your heart and all those things together, you as a person, your soul, to unravel itself, to put other stressful things out of your mind and just get on with the process of it. I feel like I would repeat myself if I went through it again, but that's basically, I think, one of the most valuable things about making art, doing art, being involved in any creative process. And that could also be like rearranging your living room. maybe your speciality is sort of a spatial arrangement thing. I was at my girlfriend's house the last couple of days, and we made a few subtle changes to her living room, and it was in and of itself kind of an artistic process. It was sort of Tetrisy. There was some feng shui going on, and there was spatial arrangement. And at the end of it, we sat back and we were deeply appreciative of the time that we spent where we weren't thinking about anything else. And we were also deeply appreciative of the simple but subtle changes to the room. And we proceeded to sit there on the couch for the next 2 or 3 hours reading, content and happy, and really just satisfied with the process.
So that's perfect. So let's I'm gonna move on a little bit. We're running out of time, but that's a exact perfect segue into what I was going to talk. So Kyle just talked about rearranging a room and feng shui. So feng shui, for those of you at home who aren't familiar with it, is basically a form of creating harmony inside, making it harmonious, kind of like nature. So that's the basics of feng shui. You have nature, and nature moves, and the universe moves a certain way. And our homes, you rearrange and you do things in your home to make it harmonious like nature. That's the basics of feng shui. There's a ton of different things into it. I'm not going to talk about that. There's 1,000 different feng shui things that are more specific, but that's the basics. Making a harmonious energy flow inside like our harmonious nature outside. Okay. So that's a great form of art. I completely agree with Kyle. So that brings me to my next point, which is the nature of art with the universe, the nature of humans with the universe, and making us harmonious with the universe. So I've talked about the holographic nature of the universe, and how the universe moves and flows, and there's this explicit reality we create, and there's this unknown energy that we don't know a lot about now. But in what we are as humans, we're life, right? We're the universe. There's life in the universe. Earth has it, and many scientists think that other planets have it. And I'm not going to talk about extraterrestrials right now, but I will say that there's life throughout the universe. It's obvious that the universe creates life, and that's harmonious. That's the way the universe works, and that's an expression of art, is being harmonious. So what I'm getting at is life, are humans art? Are we art of the universe? Did the universe unknowingly create us as an expression, as a harmonious expression? And so, in my opinion, yes, the answer is yes.
No.
Shut up. No. Life is art. Nature is art. The definition, the beginning, an expression or application of human creative skill. What if you take human out of it? The expression or application of skill and imagination. What is creation in the universe but skill and imagination? And so as life, we're art. So that's why, as kind of getting at through the whole show, is the definition is so narrow, because in my opinion, all life is art. We are art as humans, as life forms, as things on this, as things on the planet Earth. We are art. Kyle's making some silly faces because he's not on the same page here. Kyle, you don't think that life itself is art?
If you viewed by humans, through humans, at humans, yes, I would say life is art. But if you go to the astral plane and say that, no, I don't think so. It doesn't seem plausible. It doesn't seem plausible to me. Does it have an artistic quality to it? Certainly. But I think it's just random and not premeditated. And I think that it's I don't think that it. No. I'm having trouble articulating, but no. I think that the universe is far too based in random scientific, chemical, and energy, combinations that somehow created us. And I think that art comes as part of the human experience.
So that one Buddha, okay, so that one Buddha with the back, the spill out that you left on there.
Yeah.
That spill out was random, and it was almost unintended. But the spill out in the back almost looked like he was sitting back. The Buddha was sitting back against a wall. So that random spill out created a really nice piece right there. So what I'm getting at is that, can art be random and still create this interesting expression?
Yes, but it's still part of the human experience. That's where I like the definition. Like, even if you take that word out of it and you say, can the universe do? Well, yes, but only because we are deciding that it is. It's only through our perspective as humans and the way we view the universe that it has any kind of artistic bits and pieces. It doesn't have a cogent ability to do it in and of itself, even though we look at it and saying, or saying, oh, that's artistic. You look at a nebula, it's beautiful, it's artistic, it's spiral. You look at nature, it's beautiful, artistic. There's repeating patterns, but that's only viewed through the human perspective. It's not there's no way. I think that there needs to be some form of intelligence to sort of to add art to add an artistic component to things.
Right. What you're saying basically is that humans, the definition of art and art for us is a definition created by humans and is enjoyed.
We put the value on it.
Right, and is enjoyed, expressed, and valued by humans.
Yes.
And it's an interesting question. Is art created and only created by humans, because that's a definition that we've created, or is it something that is more universal, that is a universal truth, is a universal creation? Is art something that we've inherited from this universe and from this reality that we're not into, that we don't know that much about? That question, I'm not going to say I know the answer to, but that's the question that I'm putting out there. That's the question that I'm pondering, is art something that is a definition created by us, or is it something that has been created by the universe and it is just flows into us naturally from the universe? So I don't know the answer to that, but it's a valid question, and obviously we will probably never know the answer to it. But that's I think that's the great mystery of art, and that's why art is so cool, is because it can be a definition we create. It can be anything we create. It can also be a universal thing. There's not many things that are universal. Truths and right and wrong and up and down, these things are not universal. These are created by us. So I don't know, is art created by us, or is art created from the universe? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
We're not we're not sure. But Kyle has a good point, and that we put a lot of definitions on art. We create art as definitions, but I think we've come to a point where we can agree that it is extremely valuable. It's a fantastic thing. So whoever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever human you are listening to this show, or non-human listening to this show out in the nethers of the universe, do some art.
Something.
Yeah, make something. Do some art, man. And just try. You know? Oh. So just do it. Make some art. So that's our art show. But before we leave, we're gonna do some 80s movies wisdom, because what's the Holographic Podcast without some 80s movies wisdom? So we're gonna move on to some Star Wars wisdom, and I want to talk about The Empire Strikes Back, which I believe was 81 when it came out. So that's 80s, right? Yep. Empire Strikes Back, 81, early 80s wisdom. So Luke goes and studies with Yoda
on Dagobah.
Dagobah, right? He's studying with Yoda, and there's a famous line that Yoda says that a lot of people quote, and a lot of people kind of latch onto when Yoda asks Luke to lift the X-wing out of the swamp, and Luke goes, "All right, I'll give it a try," and Yoda says, "No, do or do not. There is no try." But that is not the wisdom. I don't want to focus on that because I don't agree with that. I think that you can try, but we'll get into that in a second. The real wisdom is slightly after that, when Luke fails to lift the X-wing, and he's like, "Oh man, I failed to lift the X-wing. I suck. I'll never be a good Jedi." He goes, sits and he pouts in the corner, and Yoda goes over, and Yoda's doing his thing. And this is the real Yoda, not the new baby Yoda, which is cool. Baby Yoda's cool, but this is the real Yoda. Yoda lifts the X-wing. He lifts it completely out of the swamp. He puts it over, and Luke's like, "Oh my God, you just lifted the X-wing." He goes over, and he's shocked. And he says, I don't believe it. And Yoda says, "That is why you failed." And that's the wisdom. That's the wisdom, is that the reason he failed is because he didn't believe it. And so you have to have some belief in your mind. You have to have some motivation in your mind that you can do something, that it can be done. But you don't need to just do. You can try. I think it's okay to try. We just talked about this. You gotta try. You gotta lay some of those blocks. You gotta lay some of those blocks in the pyramid and try and get up to a point where you're more confident. But even when you try, you can have belief that you can do it. So that's the wisdom. Kyle, how do you feel about this wisdom? Would you agree with Yoda?
Yeah, no, I mean, I honestly don't have much to add. I think it's a really good thing to focus on, and I think that I understand why people latch on to the first part of it, because it's motivational,
Right.
And there is something to be said for not doing something half-assed, although. If you listen to our former podcasts, Tony's 100%er. I'm more of a 60% kind of guy. So
totally.
We've got, and both have value, so I understand why people say, well, don't just try it, just do it, and that's got value. But at the same time, there are circumstances that dictate that you are going to, you just have to try. But one could say that trying is the doing. Trying is the doing, and not trying is the do nothing. You know what I mean? So, in a way, Yoda's logic on that first quote is sort of, it's kind of pretzel-y, I mean,
right.
If you try, you are doing it. You can try and fail, and that has value, because, to go to 90s movies wisdom, Alfred from the Batman, played by Michael Caine, he says, why do we fall? So that we can learn to pick ourselves back up again.
Right.
And I think that has more value going to your secondary Yoda quote, which is that, you can try and fail, but you still have to believe in the process, and that you're going to come away with something, even if it's unsuccessful. You have done it once, or attempted to do it once, and it's just a jumping off point. It's dipping your toe in the water. That's really what you got to do. You got to dip your toe in the water. Some people say, no, you can't dip your toe in the water. You got to jump in. Yeah, there's room for both, I would say. There's room for both. It's circumstantial.
I completely agree. There's room for both. And that's kind of what you were alluding to, is there's no concrete thing here. No, you have to jump in. No, you don't have to do anything. I don't like concrete definitions. I don't like one way or the other. I don't like do or do not. I don't like jumping in or not going in at all. I like this middle ground that we've agreed that is the way that where we should be. We should be in a middle ground. You can believe something and try something, and it's okay. It's okay to try 65% and still try. It's okay to think it's 110%. It's okay. It's okay to do something. But I guess we can agree that you got to do something. You can't just do nothing.
Yeah, I agree. That's good. Movies wisdom.
Movies wisdom. All right, folks. That was some Star Wars wisdom. And that's it. That concludes the show for today. We appreciate all the listeners and the viewers for making it this far. Thank you. Kyle, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Tony. It was a really, really excellent discussion today. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Me too. I enjoyed it a lot. Everyone go do some art. Let's make society and the world a better place by doing art. And this is the Holographic Podcast, signing off.